Hello everybody. This is the video that I'm doing for Past Life Oracle Cards by Doreen Virtue and Brian Weiss. It is a difficult deck to get hold of. There's a lot of fake copies running around and they are selling this deck without the guidebook. So maybe you've come to this video without the guidebook, because there's nothing worse than buying a deck and you realize that you've bought a fake and it hasn't got the guidebook, which isn't very helpful. So the rear of the deck says, and back in the day this was $15.95 USA, and I think now decks are around $29, so we'll just see. As I said, you can't get anything that has got Doreen's name on it anymore. They haven't been published, so I was really hoping that Brian Weiss would bring out this deck, because I've noticed a lot of decks that has Doreen and co-authored, you know, the co-author has reproduced. If you haven't already, Brian Weiss has got a fantastic book that you can read about past lives. So let's read the reverse of this deck. Who were you in a past life? Your eternal soul has lived other lifetimes that affect your current career, health, relationships, family, and life lessons. Doreen Virtue and Brian L. Weiss, MD, have teamed up to create an easy-to-use, safe, and gentle tool to uncover messages from and about your past lives. This beautiful 44-card deck and accompanying guidebook will help you understand your own patterns and behaviors so that you can overcome negative blocks and enjoy greater happiness, well-being, and love. So it is a standard Hay House deck for back in the day, but the pictures themselves, back when Hay House did decks such as this, they did a lot of decks that were computerized, but these are photos. They are photos, then they clearly have big printing on them that, you know, will probably, hopefully they help you if you haven't got a book to go intuitively. Like for instance, the Greco-Roman, you know that there's going to be some associations with that time period, Galactica. So I'm going to put the cards up. I first want to discuss about the guidebook in case you haven't got it. It is the standard Hay House. It talks about how to use the decks, how to clear the deck, how to consecrate the cards, asking your questions, shuffling the cards, cleansing the deck. If you have this deck, hold it to your heart and say, "Dear God, I ask that you watch over this experience, making certain that only true divine guidance comes through. Please help me release my ego fears so that I can clearly see, hear, feel, and know the messages that you have for me, and know the messages that you have for me. I ask that this oracle card reading bring blessings to everyone involved today, tomorrow, and in the future." So it says choosing a card, consulting the guidebook, 3 card messages, the meaning of the card. So it has got the black and white image of the card plus the information. I hope, if you haven't got the guidebook, I hope just discussing about a few of the readings that I've just done with this helps you, and it gives you a sort of an idea of how to perhaps tap into this intuitively. There's also a lot of videos on YouTube that you can do that can help you with your past life. I've done my past life. I was a nurse in the army in the war, and I was in a big tent and there was lots of beds around me, and I remember having this man approach me, and I sort of was boss and I was quite plumpish, and I said, "No, everything's under control." So I did that at a spiritualist church, and she used essential oils and she brought me into a meditation. That's the way I was able to view it. But interesting, because tonight when I pulled these cards up, I got this card that kept popping up. So it's interesting. So let's put these cards up. I will, as I said, discuss any readings that I've just done this evening to sort of help you shed some light on how I got the readings and the information. So the first one is health, the arts, male, female. This came up in the reading, the male, female. I got the card male, female, phobias, and forgiveness. And it was a reading about this lady who has a phobia about commitment. She finds it really difficult to have relationships, and she finds it very difficult to forgive, which is blocking her from this relationship. So it's quite interesting about that. The male, female, if you do get this card in your deck, it is talking about, you know, perhaps you've got infertility problems if this is your first time being a female in this life. And if you're a male, perhaps you struggle to have like a male type image, you know. The Atlantis came through a few readings, the Atlantis, and there's dolphins on this deck. Obviously Atlantis relates to possibly you've had a past life where, you know, you drowned basically, but it also speaks in the booklet about you sort of distrusts the government because the government on Atlantis misused the crystal energy powers. So I did do a reading which had Atlantis, spirituality, so that was quite interesting there. Trust and faith is the card that I've been pulling up. It's interesting, I pulled it up and then I shuffled and I got the red flag again. So that spoke about, you know, like perhaps inviting people into my life that are red flags that I can't trust. Authority figures, wisdom, finance is a big one for past life. You know, perhaps you've got a blockage of finances. Perhaps you feel like you don't deserve it in a way. Now the biblical one that's about to come up, the biblical one was really interesting because this came up with the Father card and also the Egypt card. So let me just get this out. So the biblical card came up with the Father card and also the Egypt card. Now what was really interesting, you know, I'm sort of skeptical about past lives because you should have done one, or you sort of, it's hard because you giving somebody a reading, you know, you've got no confirmation to go on. At least with mediumship, you know, that you've got that confirmation. But it was interesting that these three cards popped up because this lady had done her regression. So the biblical one was, you know, you were around in that time of God and living that time. The Father is you've lived with your father before, or you've had a relationship with your father in a past life. And the Egypt obviously is where you lived. And she had a regression, and what she saw in her regression was she died in Egypt and she was put to death because she had a relationship with somebody that was forbidden. So it was quite interesting that this has come up. And in this life, she has no relationship with her father or her mother. So it was very interesting. The Celtic one did come up in a reading, and she did say her parents are from England. It came up with the Rider and the Scribe card. It also came up, and I sort of felt like there was a stone hedge type of thing, which was interesting because then we've got the stone, you know, like the Scotland, the stone there. It also came up with the trees, which was really about, I said, oh, maybe you lived at a time where there was druid, you know, like fairies and whatnot. So it is interesting. We've got the unrequited love, the wars and battles. I've seen also someone provide this deck and they've actually read the book about it. So I'll put their link in the description box, which may be helpful for you. It's just wonderful that people are able to do that for others. The medicine man and woman. Now the phobia one came up. Now this phobia card, it came up in the way that I said was the male and female having a phobia of commitment and forgiveness. So that was the interesting one. Spouse. Communal living came up in the way of, communal living came up with the farm, it came up with the trees, and it came up with the ships. So this was interesting. So in this reading, I got that, you know, she has this phobia about water, and I could even feel my feet going up and down like I was on a boat. So that was quite interesting. So, and I said, oh, body of water. I said, maybe you drowned, you know, on the ocean. And the farm and trees to me were really about being grounded, you know, loving earth, being stuck on earth. And the phobia that came up to me was, you know, like heights as well, likes to be flat on the ground. But she has a phobia about going over bridges. So that was quite interesting how that came up. And the communal card in this deck, in the booklet, it talks about you live in a community, so everything, what's yours is theirs, what's theirs is yours. And perhaps in this lifetime you have issues with finances. So she said, oh my goodness, I do always have issues with finances. So that was interesting how that popped up, and a bit of confirmation there, you know, about the body of water. Galactica. Now the cards itself are standard Hay House. You know, they have got the gold. You know, that was very, very interesting with Hay House, and they used to do a lot of decks with the gold. The Greco-Roman, I think this came up in my first reading. Did it? Oh, yes, it did. This came up in my first reading, and it came up with, I said, oh gosh, I sort of feel like you've got a goat, you know, you're pulling a goat. And I said, I'm also hearing classical music, and this guy does listen to classical music, so that was quite interesting, and he is interested in history and Roman times. So we've got the High Priestess or the High Priest, angels, monk or nun, so there's a few things dating back, transportation, the orphan. I remember like years ago when I first started to use this deck, and as I said, I felt really uncomfortable using it because I said there's no evidence that can come through unless someone's had their regression. So I did pull this once. It was about the orphan, the forgiveness, Asia, lessons and blessings, knighthood, karmic relationship, food and hunger popped up in a card. You know, I said to the girl, you know, do you have any eating disorder, or do you put on weight? And she says, yes, I have got weight issues. And she also feels very, very guilty about throwing away old food and food. So that's interesting. Persecution and inquisition, mother, love life. So you can always make your own deck, I suppose, you know, like if you want to, but definitely meditation is the key, I think, for past life. Native American, so you can actually visualize it and know it, or even dream about it. Imprisonment or slavery, I did put that up on my shorts today. And leaving or travel and vows. I also did pull the tree card for somebody else, and I said, oh gosh, I feel like I'm hearing pastry chef. So, and she loved to cook, so that was quite interesting. So that's the deck for you. You know, as I said, if you do buy this, you know, you're probably going to get a fake, you know, unless of course you see the guidebook or ask for the guidebook, and if it's not available, you probably know that. Unfortunately, there is decks going around that are not from the publisher itself, and as I said, this is now out of print, but definitely well worth hunting around if you're after the past life. But also too, you can get the book by Brian Weiss, Many Life, Many Masters, which is very good. So, and I will put the link for the young lady that's very helpful, that's put the description of the book. Knowing that people haven't got the guidebook, I'll put that link up there in the cards, so you can click on that, and hopefully that brings you some closure so you can understand your own cards if you've got a deck without the guidebook. But please don't forget to like and subscribe. Until we meet again.